John Smith stood amidst the ruins of a once bustling town, the remnants of war heavy in the air. The landscape bore the scars of conflict. Crumbling buildings and echoes of lost lives surrounded him. It was the winter of 1943, and the frigid wind carried whispers of an impending offensive that the world would soon witness. As he leaned against a cold stone wall, remnants of a shattered market, he could feel the tension rising like the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. The German forces, driven by their unyielding ambition, had meticulously crafted an elaborate plan for an advance that some were bold enough to label as unstoppable. The men in their grey uniforms exuded confidence as they prepared for their next strike. John had always held a grudging respect for the discipline and organization of the German military. There was a certain artistry in their orchestration of war. Strategists, officers, and soldiers worked seamlessly together, their movements a grim ballet in a theater of destruction. In the makeshift command tent, maps sprawled across tables like the fragmented dreams of both conquerors and the conquered. John observed as generals discussed troop placements with fervor, their voices raised like a crescendo, building toward a climactic moment. Each position, each decision, felt monumental. They were certain that this offensive would break through enemy lines and secure a decisive victory. Yet, in the recesses of his mind, John felt a gnawing doubt. As he lingered, he overheard a conversation between two officers. They spoke animatedly about a fuel supply that was critical for sustaining their advance. It was a topic that John had previously brushed aside, but now it intrigued him. A single miscalculation threatening the entire operation. Fuel, he realized, was the lifeblood of their machinery, the dynamic force propelling their aspirations. Without it, the mighty tanks and trucks would stall, turning the tide against them. The officers gestured toward a chart dotted with red marks, each indicating an Allied outpost. They explained how the fuel was to be drawn from a series of depots, with pipelines running through treacherous terrain. The further they advanced without secure supplies, the more precarious their position became. The initial confidence that fueled the German soldiers' march seemed fragile under the weight of this new revelation, and John felt the chill of uncertainty settle in his gut. In the heart of winter, with snow beginning to blanket the ground, preparations escalated. Soldiers trained rigorously, their breaths visible in the frigid air as they honed their skills for the battle ahead. John admired their resolve. They trudged through mud and frost, clinging to their ideals of glory and duty. Yet he also sensed an undercurrent of anxiety swirling beneath their bravado. Whispers of the importance of supplies buzzed among them like the swarm of a distant hornet's nest, each soldier secretly aware of the ticking clock lurking behind their ambitions. John's thoughts drifted back to his own experiences in the war, scattered memories of valor and defeat. He had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, battles fought not just on the field, but within the hearts of those who were forced to fight. The German advance was no different. It was a reflection of humanity's relentless thirst for triumph, even at the cost of lives and lands. He had once shared the fervor that propelled such military endeavors, but with time, he had come to understand the tragedy that lay in their wake. If you're finding this story captivating, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Days turned into a blur as the German forces readied themselves for their offensive. It was a spectacle of might, their tanks gleaming, artillery meticulously positioned, the whole machine of war oiled and prepared. But John could sense the whisper of fate lingering, the fragility of their meticulously laid plans. Each checkpoint they passed was a step deeper into unknown territory, their supply lines stretching thinner with every mile. In the hushed conversations of soldiers and officers alike, worry began to seep through the cracks in their armor. The command tent buzzed with anticipation as news of enemy movements filtered in. Reconnaissance reports indicated that the Allies were gathering their forces, preparing to counter the impending onslaught. John could see the excitement in the eyes of the commanding officers, yet they remained oblivious to the dark cloud looming just over the horizon, an impending miscalculation in fuel planning that could spell disaster. He had heard that the Allies were aware of the German dependence on fuel supply, a fact that could shift the balance of power back into their favor if exploited correctly. As night cloaked the camp, John sat beneath the flickering light of a lantern, contemplating the irony of war. The German forces, so meticulously organized, had overlooked the simplest of truths. To sustain their ambition, they needed to secure their lifeblood. He imagined what it would be like if the rumors swirling around the fuel miscalculations began to spread, how fear could seep into the hearts of soldiers, disrupting the rhythm of their advance. His thoughts were interrupted by a distant rumble, growing nearer with each passing moment. It was the sound of engines, a symphony of machinery harmonizing with the chaos of war. The German advance was officially upon them. John watched from the shadows, feeling a mix of admiration and dread. He respected their determination, but couldn't shake the foreboding feeling that the misstep of a missing fuel supply could unravel everything. The soldiers moved with purpose, their faces set in grim determination. Each footstep felt heavy with consequence as they prepared to engage in a battle that would test both their will and their resolve. John felt the tension wrap around him like an iron grip, the air thick with anticipation. As the German forces surged forward, the prospect of glory was a palpable presence, yet lurking beneath the surface was a growing storm, threatening to alter the course of the conflict irrevocably. And so the stage was set for an offensive that promised to be remarkable, yet fraught with peril. As John Smith observed the unfolding drama, a singular thought echoed through his mind. A miscalculation, one moment in time, could be all it took to turn the tide of war. The chaos that would ensue would rewrite the destiny of countless souls, forever altering the arc of history in ways no one could yet foresee. John Smith watched as the German advance unfolded with an alarming speed. The once still air vibrated with the rumble of armored vehicles, their engines growling like restless beasts, eager to unleash chaos upon the land. Each passing hour brought reports of swift victories. The Germans had overrun several key positions, pushing deeper into enemy territory. However, beneath the surface of this apparent triumph, a nagging doubt crept into John's mind. Despite the German strategist's confidence, he questioned the sustainability of their rapid gains. Fuel supplies could easily become a chink in their armor. As he paced through the command tent, John's gaze drifted toward the officers engrossed in their maps. They spoke animatedly about the location of fuel depots, but their plans seemed dangerously optimistic. Could they truly maintain such momentum without adequate resources? He felt a tightening in his chest, a blend of admiration for their courage and skepticism about their arrogance. The officers' laughter echoed around him, an unsettling contrast to the tension simmering just outside their walls. In the distance, a loud explosion reverberated through the town, shaking the ground beneath John's feet. He flinched, instinctively moving toward a window. A plume of smoke rose ominously against the pale sky. His heart raced as he recalled the last reports about unexpected resistance from Allied forces. The German advance was not as one-sided as it appeared. Pockets of defiance lingered, an unyielding spirit bolstered by desperation and necessity. Although the commanders dismissed these skirmishes as minor inconveniences, John felt a chill of foreboding. The following days passed with a troubling rhythm. While the Germans continued to capture territories, the resistance grew fiercer. Each encounter revealed the Allies' resilience, and with it, the cracks began to show in the German strategy. Supply lines stretched thinner, their vulnerability exposed. John overheard hushed conversations about dwindling fuel reserves, the once confident bravado of the officers starting to fray. They had anticipated fierce fighting, but the tenacity of their opponents had taken them by surprise. One evening, while the light waned and shadows crept through the tent, John found himself seated with a group of soldiers. They shared rations and stories, laughter mingling with uncertainty. Among them was Hans, a mechanic whose hands were stained with grease and wear. "It's not just about the tanks," Hans remarked, his voice low yet firm. "Without fuel, we're nothing. Those Allied bastards know it too." John nodded, the weight of Hans's words settling heavily in his mind. The mechanic's revelation echoed his own growing fears, raising the question of whether the Germans had been too reckless in their advance. As the days progressed, John noticed the atmosphere shift. The officers grew more agitated, their initial confidence replaced by a palpable tension. The commanders convened frequently, their discussions laden with urgency. Glancing through the flaps of the command tent, John caught sight of their faces, hardened and strained, as if the very weight of the war bore down upon them. It was a stark contrast to the arrogance he had witnessed earlier, a transformation that underscored the reality they were now grappling with. Reports continued to flood in, detailing clashes that had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. The Allies, emboldened by their early successes, launched counterattacks that disrupted German supply routes. Each report was a reminder that the tide could turn with a single miscalculation. John's pulse quickened as he considered the implications of these developments. The rapid advance that had once seemed unstoppable was now teetering on the brink, and the German commanders appeared oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. One night, as the moon cast a silvery glow on the battlefield, John ventured outside the command tent to gather his thoughts. The air was thick with tension, and the distant sounds of battle echoed in his ears. He could see the flickers of light from fires burning in the distance, remnants of skirmishes that had erupted throughout the night. John's heart sank as he contemplated the cost of this advance, both in human lives and resources. The Germans had pushed forward, but at what price? A figure emerged from the shadows, and John recognized Lieutenant Müller, who had been one of the most vocal proponents of the offensive. The lieutenant's usual bravado had dimmed, his eyes clouded with worry. "John," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've lost contact with several supply convoys. Something isn't right." The lieutenant's admission was a crack in the facade of certainty that had surrounded the German command. John felt a surge of hope mixed with dread. Perhaps the tides were beginning to shift, revealing the vulnerabilities hidden beneath the surface. As they spoke, the distant rumble of tanks reverberated through the night. John's thoughts raced. If the Germans were to maintain any semblance of control, they needed to reassess their strategy. Yet, he sensed an undercurrent of pride among the commanders that might prevent them from acknowledging their mistakes. The tension between admiration for their military prowess and skepticism regarding their decisions gnawed at him more than ever. With each passing day, the pressure mounted. Fuel reserves dwindled while the Allies continued to mount their resistance, determined to reclaim what had been lost. John felt like a spectator at the edge of a precipice, witnessing the unfolding drama of war while grappling with his own conflicting emotions. He admired the bravery of the soldiers on both sides, yet feared for the consequences of their relentless pursuit of victory. In the heart of the German command, decisions loomed large. Would they double down on their advance, risking further losses? Or would they retreat, acknowledging the cracks in their strategy? John could feel the atmosphere shifting again, a storm brewing as resources tightened and the Allies pressed on. The revelation that the German advance could falter due to something as simple as a fuel miscalculation sent shivers down his spine. The once mighty juggernaut now appeared vulnerable, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to unfold. As he returned to the command tent, the flickering lanterns cast long shadows across the desolate landscape. John knew that the days ahead would be critical. The German command faced a pivotal decision, one that could either lead to further triumphs or catastrophic failures. The tension was a taut string, ready to snap, and John was acutely aware that the choices made in the coming hours would ripple across the battlefield, changing the course of the war forever. The atmosphere in the command tent grew electric, a palpable tension slicing through the air as the hours dwindled. John Smith leaned against the rough wooden table, the smell of damp paper mingling with sweat and fear. Outside, the fading light cast long shadows over the landscape, where the remnants of what had once been a thriving town stood as mute witnesses to the chaos of war. The soldiers around him, their faces a mixture of determination and apprehension, were hardly aware of the growing storm brewing within the German ranks. Suddenly, the flap of the tent burst open, and a lanky officer, his uniform slightly disheveled, strode in with a sense of urgency. "We have a situation," he announced, his voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and dread. The chatter among the officers ceased, replaced by a taut silence. John felt his heart race, the anticipation of unrest settling heavily in his chest. "Report," one of the senior officers commanded, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. The younger officer took a deep breath, scanning the faces before him. "Our fuel reserves are critically low. The depot we were counting on has been miscalculated. It won't support our advance." A ripple of disbelief spread through the room, quickly morphing into an eruption of voices. John's mind raced to grasp the implications of this revelation. He had overheard whispers of the risks associated with their fuel supply. But this was a catastrophic oversight that could unravel the entire offensive. "Who's responsible for this?" A voice roared from the back, laced with anger. "We cannot let this happen. We were to be unstoppable." The tension snapped like a taut wire, and John could sense the shift in the mood. The confident bravado that had marked their planning was being replaced by a gnawing uncertainty, like a storm cloud looming over their heads. John's admiration for the German strategy began to wane, replaced by an unsettling realization. The same ruthlessness that drove them forward now appeared reckless, a gamble on a precarious edge. He glanced at the officers, their faces now etched with worry, and for the first time, he saw them not just as commanders, but as men grappling with the weight of decisions that could lead to ruin. As the officers argued, trying to formulate a new plan, John found himself stepping outside the tent. The biting cold nipped at his skin, stark against the chaos inside. He looked out at the landscape, the horizon marred by the silhouette of distant smoke plumes. It was a haunting reminder of the destruction wrought by this very advance. The quiet of the night contrasted sharply with the clamor within, and he was struck by the absurdity of their situation. Men driven by ambition, now ensnared by their own miscalculations. Back inside, the discussions grew more frantic, the officers struggling to piece together a strategy to mitigate the impending crisis. "We must divert resources from other fronts," one officer suggested, his voice rising over the din. "We can't afford to lose momentum." "But at what cost?" another countered. "Do we sacrifice our men for a flawed plan?" The room fell silent, the weight of that question suffocating. John could sense the gravity of their predicament sinking in, like a heavy fog settling over their resolve. In the midst of the turmoil, a calm voice emerged, a seasoned general known for his strategic prowess. "We have faced adversity before," he said, his tone steady, commanding attention. "Let's not forget our strength lies in adaptability. We will find a solution, but we must act swiftly." John listened intently as the general outlined a series of maneuvers designed to conserve fuel, while still maintaining pressure on the Allied forces. The plan involved a retreat to secure the remaining depots and utilizing smaller units for covert operations, a strategy that would force the enemy to expend their resources. There was a glimmer of hope in his words, but John felt a pang of unease. Would this desperation lead to more lives lost? As the meeting drew to a close, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on a precipice, teetering between triumph and disaster. He returned to his spot, feeling the weight of the officer's anxiety settle over him like a cloak. The initial strides of victory now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the looming threat of failure. In the following days, the German forces prepared for their bold maneuver. John found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, fear, determination, and a gnawing sense of doubt. He had seen the faces of his comrades, their hopes pinned on a plan that felt increasingly fragile. The weight of responsibility bore down on him. He knew that the outcome of this operation could alter the course of the war. As dawn broke on the day of the operation, the air crackled with tension. John stood among his fellow soldiers, the chill of the morning settling in his bones. They moved with a sense of purpose, yet the uncertainty loomed large. Would they find the supplies they desperately needed, or would this attempt lead to further losses? The convoy set out, navigating through the desolate landscape. The sounds of engines rumbled in the distance, a stark contrast to the eerie silence that surrounded them. John's heart raced as they approached the depot, every instinct screaming at him to remain vigilant. The fear of ambush hung thick in the air, and he could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. As they neared the depot, the sight that greeted them was both a relief and a shock. The Allies had indeed anticipated their move. Tanks and troops were positioned strategically, ready to intercept. The realization struck John like a thunderclap. Their advance had been thwarted not by a lack of fuel, but by the very resilience they had underestimated. "Fall back!" John shouted, his voice rising above the chaos as bullets whizzed past. The soldiers scrambled, the once cohesive unit splintering under pressure. John's pulse quickened as he fought to maintain order, rallying those around him to retreat. The desperate clamor of voices echoed in his ears, but he steeled himself, pushing through the panic. In the chaos, John caught sight of a familiar figure, a young lieutenant, panic etched across his face. "We can't just leave," the lieutenant yelled, desperation lacing his voice. "We need to fight." John's heart sank. "We'll fight another day," he replied, forcing calm into his tone. "We need to regroup and rethink our strategy." The lieutenant hesitated, but the urgency of the moment pulled him back to reality. As they retreated, John could feel the weight of defeat settling over him. The Allies had not only halted their advance, they had shifted the momentum of the war. The miscalculation had cost them dearly, but it had also opened John's eyes to the unpredictability of conflict. No plan, however well laid, was infallible. In the days that followed, the German command re-evaluated their strategies. The lessons learned from this failed advance would resonate through their ranks, reshaping their approach to the war. John found himself reflecting on the nature of warfare, the delicate balance of strategy and chance. The unpredictability was a harsh teacher, but it was a lesson he would carry with him. As the war raged on, John understood that the tides could turn at any moment. Each day brought new challenges, new revelations, and the haunting reminder that human error could lead to catastrophic outcomes. In the end, it was not just about the fuel or the plans. It was about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The war was far from over, and John was determined to navigate the uncertainties ahead. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Your support means the world to us.